Welcome to Pennsylvania Newsmakers, and thanks for joining us. Well, we're going to talk about the status of Pennsylvania's roads and bridges, and then we're going to get to, guess what, our money with Pennsylvania State Treasurer Stacy Garrity. Back after these words.
Welcome to the fast-paced and unrehearsed weekly discussion featuring the leaders who help shape your world. Join us as we address the issues that impact you each and every day. This is Pennsylvania Newsmakers. And now, here's your host, Terry Madonna.
Well, joining me is Stacy Garrity. She's Pennsylvania State Treasurer. She was elected last year. Do I got that right? 2020? I think I got that right. No?
I took office January 19th, so just about a little over 10 months in.
All right, but when you were elected last November.
Yes, it was.
All right, I'll tell you, there's an important topic that we have to discuss today, and it's the fiscal health of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. It's something that we hear about, and I don't think we could have a better guest to talk about it than the state treasurer, which is your responsibility. So,
well, thank you, Terry, and it's great to be back on your show. Thanks for having me. So there's a lot of ways to measure Pennsylvania's fiscal health. And if your viewers really want to dig into it, they can go on to Treasury's transparency portal. And we actually have a fiscal health scorecard where there's about 13 indicators. So different things like our bond rating, pension, funding, as well as the rainy day fund.
Well, you know, there's a big debate about taxes, and it's always about, you know, the legislature and the governor have to work it out. Sometimes they do it on time. Sometimes it doesn't get done until a couple of months after when the new budget is supposed to be in place. Are you comfortable with the budget and the tax situation as it now stands?
Well, for right now, we're in pretty good shape. So if you look at our general fund balance, we have $8.7 billion right now. And if you compare that to last year at the same time, we had $1.3 billion. Now, obviously, the reason we have so much is the federal monies. Yes, exactly right. So we should be good for this fiscal year. However, what we have to remember is that those federal funds were one time. And so that's right. Right. So when we get a couple years out, we could be hitting that fiscal cliff. Yeah. So we're really going to have to look at our spending.
Yeah, I mean, the big debate is, in some respect, with the voters, it's not always how much, but it's what it's going to cost and what you get for it. So are you comfortable in most cases with what the folks in the state get from their dollars that go into, obviously, taxes that then turn around with state spending?
Well, I think we should trim our spending, but there is one good situation that we have right now, which is our rainy day fund. So, of course, the rainy day fund would be, that's basically the number of days that you would have to operate if we got into trouble. And so the General Assembly, so the legislators, they put in about $2.7 billion into the rainy day fund, which takes our number of days right now to almost 26 days in the rainy day fund, which is about the national media. So that means if we had
no money at all coming from the state from its normal fiscal year budget, you would have 26 days?
26 days to operate. But before we put that deposit in, we had less than 2 days. So I do really applaud the legislators for making that deposit because it's important.
Well, that only makes sense. I mean, you have to, it's like when we bring folks on and talk about their own family fiscal health, they always say, you know, you have to have money for emergency, you have to put money somewhere so that if something happens, you can, pay the bills, right?
Exactly. It's the same concept.
All right. We're going to run to a break. When we come back, I want to talk about, and this you're going to have to explain, Ledger 5. I hear that term. I have no clue. Well, I know what it means in part because her office sent me the material, but what is Ledger 5 and why is it important? And we'll get to that after these words.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the Pennsylvania Chamber of Business and Industry, the statewide voice of business, and by the Pennsylvania State Education Association and Partners for Public Education, bringing the power of a great education to our schools, our students, and our communities. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Pennsylvania Highway Information Association, the go-to source to learn about transportation projects and issues. Please visit pahighwayinfo.org. And by the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association. Business in Pennsylvania is our business.
Well, I'm chatting with Pennsylvania Treasurer Stacy Garrity. We're talking about a whole bunch of things dealing with, as I like to put it, our money, because it's taxpayer dollars that really fund the operation. Oh, whether it's state or federal, it comes from our pockets, so to speak. All right, State Treasurer, let's talk about something that's called Ledger 5. First of all, what's Ledger 5?
Yes, doesn't it sound mysterious?
It does.
Okay, so Ledger 5, Terry, that's an accounting tool, and what it's used to account for money that we spend that wasn't appropriated, so it wasn't budgeted. Okay, so for example, last fiscal year we spent just about $850 million that wasn't appropriated. And that's quite a bit of money. And I went back and looked over the last 9 years, and the total is $2.5 billion.
That money, and it's not appropriated? Well,
Correct.
What authority do they have to spend that money?
Well, it's largely Department of Human Services.
Okay.
Okay, so it would be, for things like your nursing homes.
Okay.
And then, of course, when you think about it, we would always want to pay our corrections officers and our state police.
No argument there.
Right, but what we've done is we added a page on our transparency portal, and we just added this 2 weeks ago, and it's called Ledger 5. So we're trying to put a shiny light on it and take the mystery right out, because these are taxpayer dollars, and taxpayers should know how every single dollar is being spent.
So in total, what's the spending go for?
So when you look over the last 9 years, so 2.2 out of the $2.5 billion was for Department of Human Services. Mm-hmm. Okay, and so it would be difficult. I think people would want us to pay anything that goes for health and human safety and those sorts of things.
Now, any of the money that's come from the federal government helpful here, or is it just state?
This is state. Okay.
I didn't know if some of that money could be utilized for Ledger 5.
Well, so Ledger 5 would be what's not budgeted. So why Ledger 5 is bad is because the public's never been able to see that.
Well, how often is it used?
Every year.
So every year?
Yes. And then at the end of the year, what happens is they have that supplemental appropriation. And so what's bad about it is that it gives people the feeling that there's, this hidden game being played, with taxpayer money. So now...
Are you saying it's a bad thing or a good thing?
Well, people will be able to see what's being spent, and then they'll be able to judge for themselves whether it's
really
good or bad.
important.
It is important.
That the people clearly know what the numbers are and can begin to understand how their money is being spent, correct?
Exactly, because it's not the money of bureaucrats, it's the money of our taxpayers.
Yeah.
And that is something that I ran on that we would highlight that.
What kind of concern do you have about it?
Actually, we met with all 4 caucuses, and everybody was very supportive of it, so I really don't have any concerns. We probably won't see anything out on Ledger 5 until December, January. Because of the federal money, it could be a little bit later. But we'll certainly highlight it. We made it very simple so that people will see exactly what's being spent.
All right, let's go to another topic, college savings accounts.
Yes.
As a professor for many years, it's something I'm very interested in. Take it.
Terry, I hope you have PA 529 accounts open for your grandchildren.
Thank you. Go ahead. What are they? Tell me
so
about those.
PA 529, it's College and Career Savings Plan. Okay, and it's just a tremendous way for families to save for their children's education. Because, of course, every dollar saved now is, less school debt that, a student will incur. And the program's been in existence for about 30 years. We just passed a huge milestone, $7 billion in assets, so very proud of that. And last year, in spite of being in the middle of a pandemic, we had the best year ever. 25,000 new accounts, which brings the total to about 267,000, and $732 million being saved. So that's pretty great.
And it's been growing steadily?
Yes, it's in really great shape. Yeah. What I like to point out is there's tremendous advantages to these PA 529. Now, I should mention, it's not just for a four-year degree. It can be used for community college, technical schools, qualified apprenticeship programs.
And technical schools are growing by leaps and bounds. Yeah.
Well, it's a real need in Pennsylvania, actually throughout the nation, is skilled labor. So I like to push that part of it.
All right, I want to thank you for coming on. All right, coming up, we're going to get into Pennsylvania's roads and bridges. What's the status? We'll do that after these words.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by Cross-State Credit Union Association. Credit unions, where people are worth more than money. To find a credit union that is right for you, go to ibelong.org. And by the Energy Association of Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania's energy information source. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Association of Pennsylvania State College and University Faculties, representing the faculty and coaches who are devoted to providing quality public higher education for Pennsylvania's college students.
Well, as I said before, we're going to talk about the status of Pennsylvania's roads and bridges, and to help me out with this is Bob Latham. He's the Executive Vice President of the Associated Pennsylvania Constructors. Bob, welcome back to the program.
Terry, great to be with you this morning.
All right, well, let's talk about first of all, before we get into some of the more specific items that we want to discuss, what's overall the status of roads and bridges? We hear different reports coming from time to time from different folks. You're the expert.
Well, Pennsylvania has a big challenge. We have one of the largest systems in the country that has to be maintained. Our geography, our geology, and our climate. Freeze thaw. As I always say, we're old, cold, and wet, and that's hard to maintain those roads, so it's very costly. Well, where does that put us? We are, according to a nationwide study, we are about 43rd in the country for condition of our interstate highways. We're
43rd out of 50 states.
We're still 45th in congestion and 46th in bad bridges. Now, what I will say about this is, since we passed the transportation funding bill in 2013, we've reduced that number of bad bridges from 6,000 to 3,000. So we have made a lot of improvements. The other thing that I'm most happy to report, and have been for the last couple of years, is that our fatalities are down. And in fact, they're a little bit up over the last couple of years, but in 2018, we reached the lowest level of highway accident fatalities in the history of the statistics. So that means we're making improvements on the safety of our roads, and that's the most important thing, is that people can get around efficiently, but also safely. And I think that PennDOT has done a great job with that going forward. So we've had some issues with funding on the pandemic, and that's put us behind a little bit, but we can talk about how we're going to catch up here soon. Yeah,
let's talk about the $1 trillion infrastructure bill. It was bipartisan. Now, not everything in Washington or Harrisburg, as you well know, is bipartisan, but that was bipartisan. I think virtually all. I mean, the leaders of our state and the leaders in our nation recognize the infrastructure need.
There were some 19 Republican senators that voted for that bill earlier in the year. You're right. So very bipartisan in the Senate. Not so much in the House, but I do want to recognize Representative Brian Fitzpatrick from Pennsylvania, Republican, who did vote for the bill from Bucks County. So we appreciate him putting up that vote. It's very, very important for mobility in the Commonwealth and other infrastructure needs, such as clean water, broadband infrastructure, and things like that, not just transportation. But what does it mean to PennDOT and mean to roads? So just by comparison, when we passed the Act 89, or the State Transportation Funding Bill, in 2013, we ramped up our construction program. That's the value of construction projects being bid in a year, to about $2.5 billion a year. We had backslid back to 2.0. What this infrastructure bill will allow us to do is get back up to that level of where we were before. So it's kind of a catch-up. It's very, very important and very welcome, but it doesn't necessarily solve the issue going forward.
All right, let's talk. I want to talk about Bridge Fund, and before I let you go, electric vehicles. We got to talk about them. We're hearing a lot about it, but there's also annual highway spending.
So essentially, we're looking at two sets of statistics. There's the annual budget, and then there's the what we call the construction program. So let's look at the construction program, because that's what we think is a really good measure of how we're doing in terms of improving our roads. So we're going to be able, through this infrastructure bill, to increase overall construction awards in the construction program, which includes the bridges as well. So we think that we're going to be able to really eat into that 3,000 structurally deficient bridges, or the bad bridges as we call them now, category, because there is a special bridge funding category in that infrastructure bill, and that'll be very helpful.
Yeah.
And also on the construction side.
Well, you can't go anywhere in the state, whether you're talking about, in a city or in a suburb or on the highways, where you don't see some kind of construction. I mean, it's all over the place.
Yeah, well, I mean, again, looking at the state and local roads, we've got a lot of needs, and we've got a lot of things that have to be done, so it's working out very well. The one thing I do want to point out is that this additional money that's coming from Washington is a match. So in other words, the state has to put up a match in order to recapture all of that money. And we're a little bit flat in our state revenues right now, and as this federal program grows, probably 2023, 2024, the legislature and the administration is going to have to address funding going forward in order to make sure we capture that match.
All right, we're going to run to a break. When we come back, if you have anything extra to say about bridge funding, that's fine. But electric vehicles,
Sure.
I'm going to ask you a big question. Is it the wave of the future? We'll be back.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Pennsylvania Medical Society. Inspired physicians committed to the good health of Pennsylvanians and the advancement of the practice of medicine.
All right, special bridge funding and electric vehicles. Let's start with bridge funding. Where are we going?
Okay, so one of the really great things about this federal infrastructure bill is that there's a special bridge category of funding, and Pennsylvania, given the number we have 26,000 bridges just on the state system alone. Think about that. That's a lot. That's a lot of structures to maintain.
That's mind-boggling.
And well, just look at how the state is with all the rivers and mountains and so on, and hills and so forth. So we're a lot different than Florida or Oklahoma.
No, I always say it's called complex geography. I mean,
exactly. So we're getting more money out of that category to help fix our bridges and continue to along that path. And I think we're going to do very well over the next 5 or 6 years with this funding. And I'm optimistic that at the end of this 5-year period that the Congress will continue this on and understand that we need to continue to invest money in our roads, bridges, and public transit as well.
Well, it's not just important for tourism and vacation driving. It's also critical to the economy. That's the point I try to make. It's the economy, the economy, the economy.
Right. So let's look at the future. And in addition to bridge funding in this bill, there's also for Pennsylvania $171 million for electric vehicle charging stations, because one of the things that electric vehicles have a problem with is once you leave your house, or you leave Harrisburg and drive to Pittsburgh, when you get there, where are you going to plug in?
Is it called gas stations?
There's no gas stations. So, the manufacturers are now looking at upping their inventory, or their delivery of electric vehicles, and not just automobiles, not just passenger cars, but commercial vehicles as well. So we think that there's going to be more and more of that, and of course, they don't consume gas, so they don't pay the gas tax, so that's going to eat into the ability to fund transportation. Yeah. For a number of years, there's been legislation that would assess a fair registration fee on electric vehicles that would be somewhat commensurate to what you and I pay in gas taxes, in our regular.
How controversial is that?
Well, I don't think it's controversial. I think we just haven't been able to come to an agreement with what is the appropriate level of funding. 19 states have it now. I don't know why we can't get this done in 2022. It's something that we should get done. Last year, Governor Wolf appointed the Transportation Revenue Options Commission. It was certainly one of their recommendations, as well as looking at some other things. And way off into the future, I think we're going to be looking at getting away from the gas tax as a way to fund transportation and looking more and more at a mileage-based fee. But again, that's something that kind of has to happen at the national level. You can't have a mileage-based fee in Pennsylvania and then a gas tax in Ohio. So until the states can organize that, that's not going to happen.
All right. Another point is that whether you're doing with an electric vehicle or a gas-driven vehicle, they all contribute to wear and tear.
Right. Exactly. So they should be paying their fair share and to help maintain the roads. The other thing we're dealing with is this delivery economy. This people having Amazon and other packages delivered right to their house. Retailers are not so much bricks and mortar anymore, and you only have only have to see the effect of the distribution economy by driving up and down our interstates, because that's where all the warehouses are, and there's a huge proliferation of those. So in order to accommodate that, Colorado has implemented a fee for delivery, a transportation fee, if you will, which is we've had in air freight for a number of years. So that's something that the Revenue Options Commission is looking at as well.
So air freight pays it, and you think it ought to go to?
We think it should be also on surface transportation. Certainly looking at the proliferation of package deliveries. And
boy, I'll
things.
tell you, the package delivery in my neighborhood, it grows and grows. Almost week by week.
A reasonable fee would help pay for the additional capacity that we're going to need in order to facilitate travel by all those delivery vehicles and trucks running up and down the interstate in between those distribution centers.
I take it before the end of the program. I take it that you sound very upbeat and enthusiastic about these changes.
Yes, I believe so. I think we've turned a corner, particularly at the federal level. When we passed Act 89, or when the legislature and the Corbett administration passed Act 89, we got to about 2/3 of our transportation needs, and we said, well, Congress hopefully will fill in the gap. Well, that was 8 years ago. It took 8 years for 3 presidential administrations, if you will, in order to make that happen. And now that we've got sort of a reasonable funding bill out of Washington, I think that we can fill in the gaps here in Pennsylvania. It's not such a huge mountain that we have to climb, just a little bit of a hill. If we can do that, I think we'll be in good shape in terms of our roads and transportation needs in the future.
Yeah. Well, this is a very important update, and we'll have you back and talk about this in the future. Not only that, it creates jobs for people as well. It's good for employment. And we're out of time.
It's very good for the employment and safety of people getting around.
All right. We'll see you next week for another edition of Pennsylvania Newsmakers, and as always, stay well.